Committee of the Whole meeting for January 4th, 2021. This meeting is being held electronically due to the ongoing pandemic, and it's in accordance with the Iowa Public Information Board requirements. So with that, I'll start us off in our presentations tonight. First, we have number one, Downtown Vision Plan and Code Adoption Process for 30 minutes. And that's with Planning and Community Services Manager, Karen Howard. So Karen, the floor is yours.
Get myself unmuted here. I'm going to share my screen. I have a brief presentation and then open it up for questions. There we go. Can everyone see my screen okay?
We can.
Okay, very good. I wanted to just go back over the downtown visioning process. I know several council members were not on the council when the downtown vision plan was adopted. So we wanted to go through a little bit of background on the genesis of the downtown vision process and the update to the zoning ordinance. Really, the genesis of that project was that we have fairly outdated zoning regulations in Cedar Falls, really a mismatch in many places in our code between what the community aspirations are and what the regulations allow and require. So there was a recognition that in different areas of the city, it may require different approaches. Zoning regulations are really just tools to implement the community's vision. And so what we wanted to make sure is before we adopted new codes, we wanted to make sure that we touch base with the community on the vision for how we want to move forward into the future. So rather than take a broad brush approach for the entire city, we decided to dive deeper into explore the character and vision for specific areas of the city to provide that solid basis for new zoning. And everyone thought that the best place to start was downtown Cedar Falls. So we drew a boundary, a study area boundary that was beyond what most people think of the typical downtown. You can see the core here on this map, the core downtown. But what we did was we drew it, the core downtown plus the neighborhoods that surround downtown. And how we chose this boundary was any zoning districts, current zoning districts that are higher density, zoning districts that surround the downtown. So not the low density single family, the R1, but the R3, the R4, any of the commercial zones that surround the downtown area. So with that study area determined, we issued an RFP and we contracted with Farrell Madden and Community Recode to do both the visioning work and the update to the zoning ordinance. And as many of you recall, we started off that process by establishing with the City Council some overarching project priorities. And those were the first thing that we did, which were adopted on April 1st of 2019. And then after that, we had a series of public kickoff events during April, where we had quite a few different stakeholder interviews with all sorts of different groups in the downtown area and in the community. Included Community Main Street. We had groups of retailers, restaurant owners, developers, architects, realtors, just a whole bunch of groups of people that we met with, the consultants met with to find out what the existing conditions were downtown, what were some of the challenges, what were the opportunities we wanted to take advantage of in the future. Then we had a public workshop where we opened it up to the whole community, and we had that kickoff workshop with the larger community. After that, taking account of that background information and that initial public input, there was a week-long design charrette that was in person for the downtown. That was in June of 2019. We had a public hands-on visioning workshop at the community center. And we had a number of additional stakeholder meetings. These were more technical in nature, again, with Community Main Street, Cedar Falls Utilities, the IDOT, because we do have a highway that runs through the study area, Greater Cedar Valley Alliance, UNI, Met Transit, Again, all sorts of groups that we met with, and I know a number of council members took advantage of this time to meet one-on-one with the consultants. And then during that week, we also had an open design studio where the public was invited to come in and meet with the consultants, see what they were working on. The consultants throughout that whole week were working at the Women's Center across the street here, working on taking the input from the public and putting it into a vision plan. We also had a lunch and learn discussion about transportation and mobility for downtown areas and how those are a little bit different than suburban areas. And then at the end of that charrette process, we had a work in progress presentation by the consultants to show what they had learned from the community about the vision for the future. They went back and refined that vision even further and then presented that to the public in September of 2019. And there was several public discussions at the Planning and Zoning Commission in October. And then finally, City Council heard about the plan and then adopted the plan in November of I guess in 2019, not last year, but the year before. And since that time, of course, we had the pandemic hit, so it slowed us down a little bit. And but we've been working on drafting new zoning as a tool to implement that vision plan. So that's where we are right now in the process. And just to go back over what's actually in the vision plan, to touch base with you again about those the City Council priorities. These are the priorities that the council adopted back at the beginning of the process, just to as a kind of touch base refresher. So what the council said at the time was create a vision plan to manage change over time in the downtown area and base the plan on broad community input, create a safe and welcoming process for the community to explore ideas about downtown, and then base the plan on market realities, changing demographics, and a diversity of uses. So what the council said they were talking about at the time was how do we plan for the future technology needs? As things change over time, what about future transportation needs? What about future housing needs? We want to build on the success and maintain the unique sense of place that is the downtown. Obviously, we have a successful downtown and we want to maintain that and build on that. Encourage economic development based on the vision. So maintain and enhance existing properties, encourage new development, invest in public infrastructures to support that vision, tailor financial incentives to support projects that further public goals. And then finally, to establish clear and objective zoning standards to help us achieve the adopted community vision. So I know there's a number of things that are ongoing here that we are working on toward those goals, and zoning is just one of those. The big ideas that came out of the vision plan from the community, these are the big ideas, was they wanted to emphasize that any new development should respect the historic character. And how do we encourage adaptive reuse of some of our historic buildings as well? And then improve walkability, safety, connectivity, comfort of walking, add street trees and other green space, rethink the parking, and provide housing options for all ages. And then making biking easier beyond the trails. Plus, there was a lot of discussion at the time about, boy, wouldn't it be nice if we had a downtown grocery store? And let's really think big and what would happen if we moved that wastewater treatment plant? Those are the things that we heard from the community. So just diving a little deeper into that, improving walkability, safety, and connectivity. So improving sidewalks throughout the downtown district, expanding that positive street environment that we have along Main Street to other side streets and to other streets in the downtown area so that every street's a pleasant place to walk. Build and reconfigure the downtown streets. Think about narrowing some of those travel lanes to slow the traffic and leave more room for additional on-street parking, wider sidewalks, and more street trees. So thinking as as time goes on, if we are redoing streets, we can think about adding some of these amenities that would make it more pleasant to walk, particularly on some of those side streets. Maintain connectivity and make sure that we have this wonderful small block size in the downtown area that really helps for mobility. It helps walkability. And so we want to make sure that we maintain that over time. And then add street trees and other green space. That was discussed quite a bit by the community. And then improve pedestrian crossings where there are concerns about safety. So the vision plan is about also visualizing how that change occurs over time, because a lot of times when you just say it in words, people can't really visualize it. So there were members of the consultant team that specialize in visualization of these concepts. And so this is a piece of 4th Street here, and as it is today. This is what would happen as we implement some of our downtown streetscape new pavers. And then what if there's new development that occurs that fills in some of the lower scale development that we have right now? And I think they use this as a demonstration of how you could build a multi-level parking structure with still that had a good street presence with retail on the bottom floor. And then what happens if you start to open back up some of those facades on those side streets to create more storefront space and invite people then to come down and make those walkable areas as well as Main Street. And then really what happens, how much it really helps the downtown area if we do add the street trees in to make it a much more pleasant place to walk. This now then 4th Street looks much more like what we have on Main Street right now. Of course, we're right in the middle of implementing new streetscaping downtown, and that's going really well. And then another principle here is rethink the parking. So in the vision plan, these are the principles that are written right into the vision plan that was adopted in November to implement the short-term and long-term strategies of the downtown parking study, revise requirements and policies to increase the supply of public parking in key locations, and develop strategies to finance that. And then on the private side, these red bullets here, really thinking about the zoning. How do we right size the parking requirements based on what we heard in the parking study and in the vision planning process? So how do we right size those parking requirements in the zoning code and create that park once environment by improving the walkability and exploring opportunities for shared parking in the downtown area. So once again, here's a visualization of how you could take a block that has a surface parking lot and create a multi-level parking structure that still has a real good presence on the street and starts to fill into some of those gaps in the downtown area. Another big idea that came out of the vision plan is to provide a wider variety of housing types to meet the future needs of the community. We have a lot of single-family detached housing in Cedar Falls, and that's great. And I think there's a lot of people that still, want to have that going forward. And we do have some concentrated pockets of duplexes and some large apartment complexes, particularly around UNI. But thinking about the opportunities moving forward, we would like to respond to the changing demographics and meet the housing needs really of the 2 largest generations in American history. And what we're talking about, of course, are the retiring baby boomers. The baby boomers are empty nesters now, a lot of us, and also retiring. And then the millennials, of course, are the age now that they're thinking about permanent housing and wanting to purchase housing or rent housing. And maybe the housing needs of those generations are not exactly the same as they have been. So how do we provide those new opportunities in Cedar Falls? And the downtown area might be one of those places to do that. So we talk in the plan about opportunities for missing middle housing. So what is that missing middle housing? That's a variety of housing types that mix seamlessly into the scale of a traditional neighborhood. So here's a photograph of a neighborhood that has a single family homes, and then right next door is a series of townhomes, and how the fact that these townhomes are really of a similar scale to single family homes in this particular neighborhood, that they fit right in seamlessly into that neighborhood. You can see another view of that particular street and how everything kind of fits together. And because they're not a huge apartment complex, it's really the similar height, fits right in. It's another housing type then that might be popular with first-time home buyers. Another one is the duplex. Of course, we have a number of duplexes in that are already mixed into our older neighborhoods. A couple of these photos are of duplexes that are in the study area already. And how do you provide opportunities maybe for this housing type as well in the neighborhood? And here's the example of the row homes idea, things that might fit into some of the downtown neighborhoods. And then small apartment buildings, we're talking, 4 to 6 units that are of the scale of a large house, perhaps, that would fit into the scale. And then providing opportunities for accessory dwelling units. A lot of communities have the opportunity to create an additional apartment, like above a garage or inside your home. Sometimes they're called mother-in-law apartments, but it's a way for first-time home buyers to make it a little affordable to buy a home if they can have a small apartment to rent out, or maybe you do have an aging parent or somebody that would make it a good idea to have an extra unit on your property. And then finally, this idea of the cottage courts, and I know that captured a lot of people's attention at the vision, at the report out. There was a lot of people that thought this was a really interesting housing type, particularly for retirees or empty nesters. The idea that not everybody wants to live in a downtown condo or in a high rise, but they don't want to have to maintain a large yard. So the idea of a cottage court where you'd have small cottages surrounding some green space, so you still have some opportunities for gardening and that sort of thing. And those can fit right into the neighborhood as well. And here's another illustration taking a block that actually exists in the study area and see how that would transform then into a cottage court around a central green. Here's another example of how you would fit things on a specific lots if they were to redevelop over time. Here's some townhomes. Here's some small apartment buildings. And a little bit larger U-shaped apartment building, but the scale of it is similar to the houses next door. And this is an illustration on Clay Street of how if those particular two lots could develop into some townhomes along that, and how that would fit in, and how you add the street trees in, and how that seems to fit into the scale of that neighborhood. So once again, with the vision plan, we set that up to take the next step into new zoning. So in the vision plan, there's also a character area map that identified on the aerial photograph kind of different character areas of the downtown. Not everything's the same here. Here we have Main Street. Here we have the urban core that's surrounding Main Street, and then a transition area over to some lower scale neighborhoods. And then of course, south of downtown, you have the extension of Main Street in another neighborhood, and thinking about how we would design the zoning code to achieve some of those goals that we talk about in the vision plan. So getting to the elements of the new zoning code, it's divided into these different sections. There's a how-to section of the code. It's an introduction because this type of zoning code is a little bit different than what we've seen in the past. So there's an intro that describes to people how to use it. Then a regulating plan, which is basically a new zoning map. We'll talk about what that is and how it works. the code has what they call building form standards. These are the general standard zoning standards that are tied to the specific streets where those lots are. There's architectural standards, and then standards also for the area between the buildings and the street, because really that's the area, those are the areas that how people experience the city as they walk or drive along the public streets. Those are pretty important areas. So the zoning in this particular case takes into account how to design those aspects of the downtown area. And then of course we have the basics, the parking and loading standards, the updates to those. Building functions are really secondary. So what uses are allowed in the downtown area, a definition section, and then there'll be some new administrative procedures that are included with this code to help it fit into the larger zoning ordinance for the city. So this lays out a little bit of the proposed schedule for the review of the downtown code, the process. So we're in the internal staff review right now. I've had a similar session with the Planning and Zoning Commission where we ran through this process with them, similar to this presentation today. We also talked to the Community Main Street Board about the overview of this review process. And of course, we're talking here today. Then February 17th is the tentative date when we would roll this out to the community, the code. There'd be a presentation at a special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then we would set up a series of work sessions with some of the same stakeholder groups that we met with during the vision plan with Community Main Street. And then if individual council members would also like an opportunity at this point during the review process, we can provide that opportunity for the council members also to meet one-on-one with the consultants. We would set up a series of work sessions with the Planning and Zoning Commission where we kind of go through each section of the code so that they understood it and I could answer any of their questions. Then there would be the formal public hearings at the Planning and Zoning Commission in March and April, and then P&Z, we would anticipate end of April sending their recommended draft to the City Council. And so we would have a committee of the whole presentation by the consultants on the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommended draft, and then a couple work sessions with the council to go through any questions that you might have at that point in time. And then we would set that date of hearing and have the formal hearings at council, hoping for final adoption by the end of July. So a little bit about how we will capture if there are suggestions or requests for changes to the draft. This is a big undertaking and it's some pretty detailed code language. And we want to make sure that we hear what the community has to say if people have questions or want changes to the code. So our thought was to capture these in what we calling a decision matrix. So in this matrix, you'll see here, if somebody proposes an amendment, we would put that into the matrix. We would say who had requested that, say Community Main Street requested a change. Then there would be an opportunity for the consultants and staff to provide an explanation of what the purpose of that specific provision is, and then maybe some potential pros and cons of making that change. And then the consultant and staff would give a recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission, for example, whether we believe it's a good change or not. And then of course this P&Z would vote on that, make a decision on that particular request. That way we can keep track of, and we know that we're acknowledging people's requests, and we can more carefully consider each of those requests and not try to do it on the fly at a public meeting, for example. So that was our thought on how to address changes that are requested. So with that kind of brief overview, I would just open it up for any questions that you might have or comments. I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Any questions from council?
I have one.
Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Harding.
First of all, thanks for the presentation. I really like the idea of the public forum you put up, when is that? Could you put that back on the screen real quick? Is that possible? Thank you. Oh, so yeah, that one. Yeah, the public review process. I think this is awesome. Is there a cutoff for when people can propose amendments or stakeholders could propose amendments and stuff? And what's like our plan to get that out to the public to make sure that people have realized that that's out there?
Right. So the idea here is that we give plenty of time. So what we're calling a public review period would be, we'll give that rollout. We'll advertise this when this is going out and being presented at the Planning and Zoning Commission. So the consultants will do a Zoom meeting and they'll give a presentation, kind of talk about what's in the code and give an overview of that. And then we'll make that draft code available to the public at that point in time. So you can see here that it's a little over a month. There's a kind of a public review period. And that's when we're going to be talking to different stakeholders, and we'll make it available. Anybody can contact me. I can, forward any questions people have to the consultants as well. So that's really the period of time we really would like people to be taking a look at the code. But of course, there are also the formal meetings here at both Planning and Zoning and City Council, where people can come to those meetings and then request changes. We can gather some requests for changes during the public review period. If we know, for example, that Community Main Street has some suggestions, we can start putting those things into the matrix so that when we get to the formal public hearing date, we can give the decision matrix to the Planning and Zoning Commission. You can see here they have quite a few different meetings that we've got scheduled through both March and April.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a great. I think that's awesome that we have that review process and it's set up that way. So thanks.
Any other questions or comments from council? Yes, Councilor Rickenberg, go ahead.
Karen, can you just kind of go back in time and explain to us why there's a review of the entire code?
So our zoning ordinance was originally written in 1970. And over time, of course, this is similar to a lot of communities, that there's a patchwork of amendments that we've done over time. But through that whole time period, we really then have a patchwork of things. And not all of it works together. There's portions of our code that conflict with each other. They don't maybe take into account different changing demographics, changing things in the community that we want to capture in a new zoning ordinance. So really, it's a good idea to take a look at the whole code. I know that's been on in the plans in the works. Maybe Stephanie and Ron can comment to this, but I think quite a number of years we've been hoping to get to an update to the entire zoning ordinance.
Can you give me just a couple examples of the conflict?
Well, for example, in the downtown area, we have different commercial zoning designations. We have C1, C2, and C3. And only a portion of the downtown area is covered. And then we overlaid that with an overlay district to try to capture, okay, the C1, C2, and C3 really weren't doing what we wanted them to do. They weren't protecting Main Street. So we adopted an overlay zone. But the overlay zone maybe didn't cover everything we wanted it to cover. There's some R3 area there, some C1 area that's not covered by the overlay zone. So there are some hidden things that could occur there that people will say, hey, wait a minute. Like for example, the R4 allows large apartment complexes. Is that really what we would like in some of those areas in those neighborhoods downtown? So there's some hidden things in there that could be a counter to what the community really desires to see going forward.
So when you talked about this being zones, I think that one map you had like zones 1 through 5, maybe there was 6, 1 through 6. So like for a large apartment building, would it, for instance, only be allowed in like zone 3? And maybe a single family home is only allowed in zone 6? Or how do you figure out what's allowed in each zone?
So that's really based on the visioning that we did with the community and talking about those different character areas. Those were discussed during that vision process. Okay, and the nice thing with a form-based ordinance like this is we can really zoom into specific streets. How would we like Clay Street really as a transition between commercial area and neighborhood? To the west, it's more neighborhood oriented. So how do we get that transition to happen? What kinds of things do we allow to happen in the transition area that we don't want to happen in the neighborhood area? So, yeah, that's what the code will be trying to address, is what we heard during the visioning process as far as the scale of the buildings and the type of uses that are going to be allowed in those areas.
Karen, can you go back to the map or pull the map back up?
Sure.
Either one is fine, but I guess that general area, that as far as what all was included in this, that one will work just fine. But wasn't that based on public input as to what the public thought or considered downtown, partially considered, or part of it was based on what the public considered downtown during one of the public meetings? Didn't we have wasn't that part of that question?
Right. So during that kickoff meeting, one of the exercises was to talk about, what do you feel like is the downtown area? And so part of that was to draw, for example, the Main Street core. People a lot of times just thought of First Street to Fifth Street along Main Street. They think of that as downtown. So other people thought of this larger area. How do we want to expand downtown beyond just Main Street? So there was a lot of discussion about how we do that. Where are the edges of where we want to have that kind of mixed use character based on what's there now and what the zoning is now and what we've said as far as expansion area goes. And then where those transitions areas are. And then, really we're talking about a lower scale number here to the west. How do we want to protect that over time? Because right now it's zoned, I believe, I can't remember if it's R3 or R4. So, ostensibly somebody could tear down a half a block there and put up a large apartment complex, but is that really what people want? That's what we didn't hear that from the community. What we heard from the community is we want to preserve the best of the downtown neighborhoods.
So then you move into, say, a Main Street number 6 there. That goes almost all the way to 18th Street, correct?
Right. And the reason that, like we said, that we included in the study area, because once again, I think a lot of that's zoned R4. And then, of course, right at 18th Street, we've got some commercial zoning there. So we wanted to take a look at these downtown areas with that really old zoning that's there now. I think we could have some things happen there that we might not like.
Certainly, and it's also carrying Main Street is kind of a logical step for continuing the parkade and such.
Right.
Thank you.
Other questions from council?
I've got a couple.
Yes, go ahead, Councilor.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Councilmember Dara, please go ahead.
Okay, all right, thanks. Number one, Karen, this is just outstanding. When we started this, I was one of those people that was saying downtown is downtown. It's Main Street and a couple blocks on either side. Then you begin to drive through that neighborhood to the south and you realize there's a lot of older housing. It's all older housing stock. And yet there's a sense of walkability downtown, and pulling all of this together just seems to me to be really where a community like Cedar Falls should be thinking. The walkability, the easy access, maybe more affordable housing. I don't know about that, but it just seems to be really a great starting place for looking at more density as we grow. Instead of sprawling, we don't have a lot of room to sprawl anyway. can we not make better use of what we have already with streets and infrastructure and that kind of thing? Looking at this map, I'm curious, have we over the years done any kind of inventory of the housing in those areas, especially that blue area between 18th Street and 6th? How much of that is rental property? How much is single family? So that's one question. The other is, have we had any discussion with developers about any interest in looking at other types of housing besides just tearing down a house or remodeling an old house or putting up another single family home? That some of those examples that you showed us of duplexes or row houses, as I drive through that neighborhood, it just looks like there's so much potential for those kinds of other types of housing. So what's available? Are people interested in that kind of development? And then as a city, if in fact you pull the trigger on this, are we ready to improve the streets and the sidewalks? And how do we do this all moving in the same direction? And I know it's not like it's a project for next year. I know it's 10 years down the road, but if we move in this direction, I think the city also needs to be prepared to make that happen in as smooth a fashion as we can. So a kind of a combination of comments. One last comment to the community and to fellow council members. This has been 2 years already, and we're another 2 years before we're going to be done with it. And maybe not to this extent, but to some extent, we've done this in other projects that just remember where we are now. And then in 2 years, when we pull the trigger on it, there's going to be people coming to us and say, how come you're doing this? And my point would be we need to continue to engage people in the early stages of these things, and compliment you guys on making that happen. This is really, in my mind, a model of how a city should plan for its future. I'll stop talking.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Councilmember Dara. Yes, I'd certainly add in there. We've said in the past that with the change of 70 or 50 years that we've had the current zoning ordinances, this probably is one of the most weighty changes that council will deal with and the public will deal with of items that will have an impact 50 years down the road from now. So love the work that's been put into it so far and the community engagement, and look forward to seeing what's next. So any final comments or thoughts from council? Yes, Councilmember Cruz, please go ahead.
Thank you.
Hey,
I'm curious what is driving things like the decision on the height and the bulk. Are we character of the neighborhood, which has been the terminology that's been used for years and years, and that along with the term you have here, the right size parking requirements. We did a change a couple years back on the C3. Single bedrooms needed one car, but then I'm finding that the size of the one bedroom's getting larger and larger, and two and maybe even three people living in a one bedroom, but you only need one car because that's what the code says. So where along the process do you have that discussion to say that single bedrooms, for example, should be limited for one car to be no more than 250 square feet, like a studio type of thing? Kind of curious on that. Where do you interject that comment other than right now when I just said it?
So there was a lot of discussion, of course, during the visioning plan, and of course that came right on the heels of the parking study. So we had a lot of good information about where people were parking, when they were parking there, when were the times when there was plenty of parking, when were the times when there was a parking crunch, looking at the different types of uses that were there. And so the vision plan didn't want to like start over. It took all that data from the parking study and integrated that into the vision plan. So the idea about right sizing the parking was the idea that, for example, one of the things that was observed during the parking study was, for example, River Place, that parking lot that's behind there, a lot of times it was sitting almost 40% empty. So, and then of course there was the whole discussion about new uses going in and having private parking areas that then nobody else can use. How do we get people to share that parking over time? So the new code you'll see has both reserved parking requirements and shared parking requirements. In other words, acknowledging that as there's different times of the day when there's higher parking needs than other times of the day, and there's times of the day that parking can be shared between different uses, so that we're not taking up valuable space downtown with surface parking lots that then sit empty much of the time. So it's a tough question. It's a really tough question, and having to deal with that in downtown area is very complicated. But I think that's one that we will be wrestling with, of course, and that we've continued to wrestle with over the years.
Well, I know that there's going to be an evolution of what the parking consultant has told us and what we implement, and then the results that we see. For example, the River Place parking, the accessibility of the parking lot to the occupants in the building is cumbersome and poorly laid out, and there's solutions that the developer agreed to but hasn't moved forward on. And like I said a little bit ago, you decide how many cars or parking spots are needed for a C3 one-bedroom unit, and then we find that the developers then increase the size of the one-bedroom because they're allowed to. You know, those sorts of reactions. There's the first wave of analysis, and then you got to have a follow-up wave. And you know, along with the height, the higher you go, the more spaces you have, more people, more cars. So where's the loop back to look at the results of the first wave of implementation? That's what I'm wondering, other than what we're saying as we go here.
Right. So the implementation so far has been the public parking policies that we've got and working through those. And then this will be the first layer of how do we address the private parking for downtown. And so you'll have an opportunity to take a look at what is proposed in the code, and we can all discuss that. But the idea here is that, of course, in a downtown area, should you have the same parking requirements that you have out on the edge of town? If you do, I think that's the issue here, is that there may not be much opportunity for more development downtown. For example, if there's not a rethinking of some of the parking requirements. That's just the reality of the situation is in the downtown area. And so there's a balancing act there of what the goals that you're trying to achieve. So
Well,
that's up for public debate. Right.
Certainly. I mean, as my fellow council members know, that there's very heated debates and concerns about how parking has evolved and the lack of readily available parking in different citizens' minds. And the discussion I had with several people about the one-bedroom size is maybe a loophole or an area that wasn't thought of to respond to. And I want to bring that forward at some point here. And I guess I'm kind of doing it right now. But on the timeline here, I want to go to that, the proposed schedule. You got February, March work sessions with Community Main Street and other stakeholders. That's, I'm assuming, in response to the public review draft that's brought out?
Yes.
And then the public's reaction and, okay. I think that's all I have then at this moment. Well, I guess the concern I have is about narrowing streets to slow down the traffic. I guess that's another way to say you're adding to the congestion. And I don't know if I would be that excited about that.
So that's not that was something that was in the vision plan, but that's obviously not something that's in the zoning ordinance, because that would relate to the public right of way. The zoning is dealing with the private space, the private lots, and then the space between the building and the street curb. So there won't be anything in the draft related to the streets themselves. of course, that's a topic, a big topic of conversation.
So when would we discuss reconfiguring downtown streets here to narrow the traffic lanes? Is that, you got it under the caption, improving walkability, safety, connectivity, comfort for the person walking, but then you say, you want to slow down the traffic. It's page 9. I mean, I have to think that when you slow down the traffic, you're the traffic. Keep going back there.
Yeah. So I'm just putting in the presentation here what's already in the vision plan that's been adopted. And I think that conversation really was about one of the things that was implemented pretty early on in the parking study was we were looking for any opportunities we could find to add more on-street parking. And I think and I could be corrected here by probably David Wicke or Stephanie or Ron, but I think we added like 50 parking spaces just by finding extra space on our streets for some additional on-street parking. So there's a lot of different ways to divide that right of way between the different users, between the cars that are traveling, between the pedestrians, between the on-street parking that's pretty valuable to the merchants downtown. So I think it's a matter of balancing all those different needs in the downtown. And that's what this is really about, was balancing all those different needs.
Right. I guess I was possibly interpreting that to say that we had a 12-foot lane of traffic getting narrowed to 10 or 9 or some number. And I don't know that's necessarily what we're looking at here. Maybe State Street had the opportunity to add a number of parallel parked cars, but so I just pointing out my knee-jerk reaction was this, to say we don't want to add congestion.
And that's an example of that change came through council for review and approval prior to it happening, just like any street would be reviewed through the pavement management plan, and council reviews that as they will later this evening.
Okay, I'm done.
All right, I think that was our end of presentation horn.
Can I have one request?
Yes, Councilor DeVere.
Would it be possible to get a visual down the road here of your map of the 8 zones and then put an overlay on it with our current zoning, just so we can see how it's changing?
Yes, and I think, the character areas that I put up on that map were from the vision plan, and those have been refined even further into the regulating plan that will be part of the code. So I think that's a very good idea. We can see the new regulating plan kind of overlaid with the existing zoning that we have now. That's an exercise we can certainly do.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. Thank you.
Could I add one more thing?
Yes, please go ahead, Councilor Dare.
It's a downside to rambling. I asked a couple questions, then I rambled and I didn't get my questions answered. And I don't expect an answer tonight, but as you're moving forward too, can we do some sort of inventory? I'm more interested in the housing than worrying about the traffic right now, but I get it's all connected. But these different styles of housing that you're offering or suggesting, what's the appetite for that? Do we have developers that have an interest in it? I think if we build them, people will move in, but are we gonna get all excited about some models that are creative and that kind of stuff, but not have anybody interested in doing
Right,
it?
and that was all part of that, the visioning process. We had that marketing consultant here, and we met one-on-one with a lot of developers, a lot of builders. So there was a lot of discussion about the different housing types and what might be needed in the downtown area. So that's a very important point. And I think we tried to capture that with the new zoning.
The only other thing that the aha I had going to those workshops, the surprising number of snowbirds that are living downtown, people who want to still maintain Cedar Falls as their home, but want to be someplace warm in the winter, and coming back to an environment like that can make us pretty unique. So I'm looking forward to moving ahead with this. Thank you, Karen.
All right, thank you. So our next item is special event permits and Sturgis Falls agreement. We have 30 minutes scheduled for that with Public Works Director Chase Schrage. So Director Schrage, the floor is yours. I think you've got your mute on, Director Schrage.
Sorry about that.
There you go. Perfect.
So tonight I'd like to go through briefly the special event permit process, as well as taking a specific focus at the Sturgis Falls event. So I want to start off with just running through what is a special event permit. So it's any event basically held on city-owned or occupied controlled areas, and that would include right-of-way, streets, trails, any parks or plaza areas. And why the application process? So the purpose of the special event permit process is to ensure compliance with the federal and state regulations and to prevent substantial or unnecessary interference with traffic flow or publicly managed infrastructure like the parks. This process was brought forward and developed, I believe, in early 2019, and we've been doing that process since that time. So the application process consists of a submittal through the Finance and Business Department. That application is due 60 days prior to the event, and that allows staff time to review and get any additional information from the applicant if it's needed. The application includes some of those items I listed there, the time and location of the event, type of event, estimated attendance, if there's any food or alcohol sales, any amplified sound or noise variance that's needed, any anticipated city services such as barricades for street closures or picnic tables for the park areas, and then a site map. And approval of these applications are also subject to additional factors that are outlined in the city code. So applications, when we receive them, they're distributed out through several city staff members, includes Public Works, Public Safety, Planning, building inspections, and risk management, specifically for insurance requirements. But it's probably hard to see there on the right is kind of a little clip of an internal checklist that we use with city staff members. You can see that there are numerous parties involved with reviewing some of the application requirements as it's distributed throughout the city. And then ultimately at the end, applications are considered on a first come, first served basis, and the final approval is by the Director of Finance and Business Operations. So that's kind of a high level summary of the special event permit process that we've been doing for a little over a year now. So I'll move over into the Sturgis Falls focus. So Sturgis Falls was started around 1975, I believe. We were looking at 45 years here in 2020, but obviously there was no event this year. So we're around 45 years for that. And the Sturgis Falls event has been 3-day events typically held at the end of June. It involves closure of specific parks and streets in the downtown area. Been free to the public since the beginning historically, and it has not had a special event permit, but has a separate contract with the city, in which I will go over in a little more detail. So kind of a brief high-level overview. The contract is, I don't know, 9-10 pages long, but kind of some of the key elements that I wanted to bring forward were the contract outlines exclusive use of certain parks: Island Park, Overman Park, Tourist and Gateway Park, Policeman's Park, and a portion of Sturgis Park. And you don't have to remember all of those. I'll have a slide. The next slide, I'll show you a map of kind of those areas. The use of other public property like streets is only by written approval by the police chief. Setup and removal schedules, cleanup and refuse reimbursement is also outlined in the contract. And the city agrees not to issue any beer, wine, liquor permits to any other groups or individuals for the parks or public properties that's outlined within the contract. The Sturgis Falls celebration must obtain the current insurance coverage requirements. Each year they come forward. So that's one of the items that goes to risk management for review. So just a little bit of history, I guess, of the contract, being that it's been in place for approximately 45 years, this event. There used to be a 10-year contract term that was renewed. I believe that was a few times that was renewed, and then we moved to a 5-year contract. And that was due to, you know, over 10 years of time, a lot of things changed, because I know Sturgis Falls event was up in the Island Park area, and with the high river elevations, that event was moved to Tourist Park, and some of that contract language needed to change within that 10 years. So we moved to a shorter term of 5 years. And then this last year in 2020, we actually moved to a 1-year agreement at that time. But this is kind of a map showing all of the areas that are outlined in the contract for exclusive use. Exclusive use would be specifically to the parks, the Island and Tourist Park, Gateway Park, and then in the upper right-hand corner would be Policeman's Park. And then the specific street closures as it relates to this event would be kind of around the City Hall area, 2nd and 3rd Street. You have a 1-block section of Clay, and then also Franklin Street. I know that there are additional street closures for short periods of time for the event. That would include the parade, or there's a Sturgis Falls 5K that I know that requires a separate set of closures. But this is generally what takes place each year. So it's been about a year that the Sturgis Falls Board has been reaching out to me requesting language to be amended within the contract. So we have not brought forward a 2021 contract yet. So the board has brought forward some proposed language that they would like to discuss. And that language is that the city agrees not to issue any special event permit on city-owned property located in this area shown off to the right. That area on the right is basically the central business overlay district, or the downtown area. It goes from 1st Street south to 7th Street, and then from Franklin Street east to the river, which basically encompasses all of the downtown area. A couple things I wanted to note was that you have to keep in mind that the special event permits are only required for the closure or use of public property, including streets, parks, those types of things. So it wouldn't be required for anything held on private property. And that Sturgis Falls is only a 3-day event, and the specific parks may be occupied for slightly longer, like Gateway Park, just due to the setup and tear down of the equipment from Sturgis Falls. So I think before we move into any sort of motion, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Additionally, I know we have individuals on tonight that would like to speak on behalf of some of their groups. So.
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Shaggy. And before we move into council discussion, I would like to give the two groups the opportunity to speak on their own behalf if they want to get both sides of this. If there is someone from the group or from either group who would like to speak, you can press *9 on your phone or the raise hand icon just to give that opportunity there. I'll give you a moment. Okay, so we have Pete Downs and Kyle Henderson and Deanna Nelson. So I'm looking for one from each group. So Deanna Nelson, I'll start with you if that makes the most sense here.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes, Deanna, just fine. Go ahead.
Oh, hello. So I am with Eagle View Partners and the plaza downtown here. And we have now, as you guys I'm sure know, we have completed the construction of the plaza downtown. And we were doing that with hopes that last year we could have an event during Sturgis down on 2nd and State area and in our plaza. And just with everything that happened, we were unable to do that. And so with the plaza being finished, we're looking forward to hopefully being able to have some community members in our little area down there during Sturgis Falls. And with the social distancing and everything, we were hoping that we would be able to close off 2nd and State Street so people would be able to space out in that area.
Okay, thank you. And are you speaking for the on behalf of the Live to 9 event, or just more about
I believe that Kyle is also on here for that, so he can speak for that. But I was just for the plaza.
Okay, thank you. I'll allow that. Okay, so Kyle Henderson, if you just give your name and address for the record. I didn't catch it.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect. Go ahead.
Great. Kyle Henderson. I'm at 1008 Eric in Cedar Falls. I'm a board member and an officer with the Cedar Basin Jazz Festival, also known as the Cedar Basin Music Festival. And I'm a committee member for the Live to 9 events that we have. The Live to 9 is a partnership between the Cedar Basin Festival and the JCs. So that's why I'm on this. But we do want to stress, and I'm only on here to stress our disagreement with this limit that's on there. The wording of this contract or the proposed wording would effectively eliminate any groups to have an ability to use a street or to present an application to the city for an event during these 3 days. And we don't see ourselves as competition at all. We don't. I won't go into the details of our events, but we will submit an application for that. But the goal of our event is to bring more people downtown. And the Sturgis Falls celebration is really to celebrate the city and our history and to be frank, to help the businesses and the charitable organizations that have events. We really don't think it's appropriate for the city to give up this ability to issue any permits, special event permits, to any other groups under this contract. We would think that the city would want the ability to make or change special event permits with anybody that may present one that's a quality event. I think that the celebration committee is trying to take this 30 block area and just simply not allow other charitable organizations or non-charitable organizations to use any piece of it. So we would like to stress our disagreement with this and request that the council not approve that wording and take away the council's ability to grant permits to other people for this 3 days.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. And I'll go over to Pete Downs. So let me unmute there. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Downs. Name and address for the record and which group you're part of.
Yeah, hi. I'm Pete Downs, 3221 Abraham Drive, Cedar Falls, Iowa. Lifelong resident, vice president of the Sturgis Falls celebration. And just a little background on this. Where the concept of the language came from was really as a result of this year. I mean, the COVID has been kind of a hit in the gut to everybody. And I think Kyle laid it out right. I mean, it's a community event. And at this time, not having an event really caused us to dig deep into our financial background and look at where it is we are at and where we need to go with this. And so that played a part in it in terms of us try not to compete within a given event. Sturgis Falls is I mean, there's over 30 different events that take place within the celebration. And it is a celebration of the community. And I guess when we look at it on an annual basis, we review our own events. And the questions we ask are, does it add value to the community event? Does it have a point of difference? Is it something that may attract people as opposed to what we're doing currently? So we've really had to kind of dig into that and look at that. Now, the events we have in Gateway Park, which primarily are bands, beer, and food, supplement a lot of the other events that exist with the celebration. So it would, I guess we would look at it as a competing event. It may detract, and quite honestly, what I'd like to see in Gateway is, 40,000 ticket sales. If no one drinks a beer, that's great with us. But it's the ticket sales that really help supplement the rest of our events. So that's a big part of it. The other piece is one of the big events we have is the Marine Band, and that's a Saturday night event in Overman Park. And when you look at it, if we have a band, down 2nd Street, aimed directly up the street at Overman Park, and this isn't to say it'll happen, but will there be an overlap of music? I've been to several music fests, and they tend to start to overlap each other to where you really can't hear what you came to hear. And there's a concern of that. But primarily it is just, we're looking at, it doesn't make the event better. And I think that's the thing you have to ask. Does it add value to the event? I think the downtown patrons are happy with the amount of people that the celebration brings to the city. But does one more event really add to it? And I think that's the thing to consider. And you know what? You can look at it. And if it does add to the celebration, then we're for it. But you really have to ask, is there a point of difference here that makes the Sturgis Fall event a better event? And the last thing I'll say is it's one weekend, out of the year. I'll attend more Live Tonight events than I'll attend any Sturgis Falls events because I really enjoy it. I think it's a great venue. But we're just talking about one weekend out of the year is all. So that is just really, it's asking, does it add value? Does it make a better community? Because that's what we're about. And I know that's what you are all about as well. So that's my 2 cents, and I appreciate you giving me the time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Downs. And with that, that was basically our two sides of this coin, both sides of the argument to hear from. I'd like to open it up for council discussion and questions. And I'll just say for the public side, because of the time limits involved, I won't have general public comment on this tonight, except we will have this again before City Council for approval, and there will be an opportunity for public comment at that time. So certainly reach out to your council members if you have a strong opinion one way or the other. But with that, I'll open it up for council discussion and questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Cyrus, go ahead.
I have a few things to say about Sturgis Falls. I think it's one of the greatest events in the whole state. It's completely free. I've been amazed at the thousands of hours that the volunteers have put in. I've seen Pete Downs and his wife not only set up the Kids Way tent, but they also cut a deal to help pay for that. And also there was an auction halfway through the year where they got an auctioneer and raised $60,000 to pay for that tent. And the amount that they give back to our community is absolutely amazing. Now, I've myself sponsored the kids jazz band down there, and I love to see the kids play jazz because I do love jazz music. And I did that with McCalachak, and they do a great job. And this Sturgis Falls celebrates all our different areas, and they give back in monetary money hundreds of thousands of dollars. They've put into the Overman Park band shell, the rec center. I even took a few notes myself
thinking about all the different things that they do. And it's one weekend out of the year. I think we could protect them because they also put on the parade, help put on the parade and all these other things. There's so many things and so many volunteers that do such a great job. I think it's a fantastic party for the city. And I would like for the jazz people to pick any other weekend and the city could help promote that. I think we have great talent in town, but for one weekend, I think we should protect the Sturgis Falls committee and all the great things they do and how they give back. And we're all glad to be part of Cedar Falls, and our Sturgis Falls is something to be proud of. And thanks to all those volunteers.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Dunn, go ahead.
Okay, so just a couple things. First, I don't think any of us would take away anything, the positives that Sturgis Falls and all the volunteers that work hard to put that celebration on bring to our community. We're grateful for the celebration. Anyone that's ever volunteered, especially for an event that happens again and again, knows that that is, like for some of those folks, a full-time job year-round. So to me, this isn't about hurting Sturgis Falls. I believe diversity should do nothing but help strengthen both the Sturgis Falls celebration and the Cedar Basin Music Celebration or Festival celebration. I love live music, so as a person who's lived in this town for 25 years now, I've been blessed to attend many a Sturgis Falls celebration and also Cedar Basin Jazz Festival, now known as Cedar Basin Music Festival. I like to have a little bit of variety. Like, you know, I feel like there's a certain group of folks who Overman Park's their place to be. And, you know, they like that vibe. Some of us go in, we get something to eat, we listen for a bit, and then we kind of move along. So then there's some people who like the Gateway Park, or what used to be in Tourist Park. That's their vibe. Some of us like just going down by the ice house and listening to the music there. And that's music has definitely changed in the past few years. Basically what I'm getting at is I don't feel like giving one organization that much power, even if it is just for a weekend, is a good move. I think that both these organizations have complemented each other and can continue to complement each other. And I think a little competition and diversity is good. So there's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councilmember Dunn. Anyone else from council wish to speak?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember DeBeer, please go ahead.
I agree that the Sturgis Falls celebration is truly a citywide celebration. It lasts one weekend, and I guess you guys pointed out it's for 45 years. I think the city needs to do everything they can to promote Sturgis and help them. My only question is on the amendment as proposed, whether we need to add where it says the city agrees not to issue any special event permits on city property located within the area previously described. Do we need to add in the words for the weekend of Sturgis so that we're clarifying it's for that weekend and it's not year long, it's one weekend? Or is that already in the contract somewhere else?
That's kind of in the first part of the contract, that
Okay.
the whole contract's based on solely for the last Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of June. So it outlines that right away in the contract.
Okay. Well, I certainly support the recommendation, and I support the other organizations on the other 51 weekends of the year.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from council?
Mayor, if I
Mr.
may.
Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Miller, please.
I agree with everybody. Sturgis Falls is a fantastic event. For myself, understanding changes happen all the time downtown. For instance, the plaza wasn't there 5 years ago, and it's a tremendous public space. I'm not comfortable putting this in place throughout the 30 blocks or the whole downtown, with not knowing what's going to happen in 5 years or anything else. The city still has an opportunity to review every application that comes. I would hope that everybody anybody submitting one, it would take the time to understand what other events are happening at Sturgis Falls, but the city also has an opportunity to review that. So for myself, I'm not comfortable going this far and wide without knowing what the future holds.
Okay. And, so another, yes, Councilmember Cruz.
So a clarifying question here, the Ice House, I guess that's called Sturgis Park. Is that still going to be the location for the Jazz Fest or Cedar Basin Music Fest? And they want to also have the plaza area? Is that what I understand? Ultimately is wanted? Or am I getting outside?
Currently, the Ice House location is the space they use today. The southern portion of Sturgis Park is used for the Sturgis Falls event. Where they move in the future, I don't know that.
You mean the eastern? Well, I guess depending on.
Okay. Procedurally, it probably, okay, Councilmember Harding, and then I'll ask for a motion to go forward.
Okay. Sorry, my internet cut out. So if this was answered, just let me know. My question would be, we have all the locations for Sturgis mapped out in the contract currently, and that's where events happen. If we shut down or amend the area to the entire area, are there going to be places that are just vacant, or are they wanting to use all of the spaces in there?
Well, it's only city-owned property.
Yeah, but my question was, is there going to be city-owned property that will be vacant during the festival, or is Sturgis wanting to utilize that as well?
I don't think they intend to use any more than what they have used in the past. I mean, there's vacant areas in the parks that are outlined in the contract they don't utilize for vendors or anything like that currently.
All right. I was just curious if that was the reason why.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Sires.
The one thing is the jazz, and as I said before, I love jazz, but they don't participate financially with the other part of the Sturgis Falls celebration, which is actually paid for by the bands and all the other things. So to say they're competing, they're not actually competing. They're more riding on the coattails, because Sturgis will go ahead and pay for the parades and all the different things that they do. Like they said, they had 30 different things that go on there. And it's a huge conglomeration, and I'm surprised that anybody's willing to step up and volunteer to head that and be on that board and do those things. And I think we're making a real mistake when we start to let people come in, and they call it competing, but this is kind of a citywide party that we all get together and help. Whatever our specialty is, we all as business people try and come together and work for the betterment of Sturgis Falls, because we all work for the betterment of Cedar Falls as a whole community. So this is our citywide party that's been going on for 45 years. And when you start to let others come in and then don't pay for all of the, like the Kids Way and all those things, take a tremendous amount of volunteers, I think we're making a big mistake. I think that needs to be protected just the one weekend out of the year.
Okay. Thanks, Councilmember Sires. So that does put us at a point where we want to have a motion forward. Would any council member like to make that motion?
I make a motion to recommend or approve the recommendation as written.
Okay, so motion, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Cruz seconds. Open it for additional discussion.
I guess I would say one thing. I kind of agree with what I heard the end of Councilmember Miller saying. I don't think the city should take sides on this. I feel like we're taking Sturgis Falls' side. I love Sturgis Falls celebration. I wish them success. I think it's awesome. But to just give them a blanket control over a whole weekend and possibly have a park sitting empty where someone could be doing something and adding to it, I feel like we should just be open. We don't have to approve that permit. It's going to be looked at on a application basis or a case-by-case basis. I mean, anyway, I don't feel comfortable going that far either.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Cruz, please.
I think Councilman Sayers hit a point there that we have to look at the Sturgis organization for 45 years or whatever time period that they've worked on this year round, thousands of volunteers, thousands of volunteer hours, maybe not that many personnel per se, but they just want, you know, some exclusivity here possibly. And, you know, we have a new venue at the plaza. Say that any organization can jump in there and raise revenue off the coattails. I have a little bit of a problem with that. I hear Mr. Miller's remarks and Mr. Harding's. Those are points, but there's 51 or weekends in the year, and it's not going to kill Live to 9 or the Jazz Fest. I mean, Jazz Fest is there. How much are they working together to promote and joint volunteers? I'd question that. So I think leaving this recommendation as it is would be appropriate for that one weekend because it's a citywide event. A lot of people are involved here, hundreds.
Thank you, Councilmember Cruz. Others, final discussion.
I'll just make one observation. I've never understood the philosophy, but it seems to work. It seems like automobile dealerships like to be next to one another. Furniture stores like to be next to one another because they draw more people in. I really feel like one other venue down there is just going to, and every time I've gone to Sturgis, I never stay in one spot. I go someplace for a while and move to the next. And I just feel like we're, by allowing the plaza to be used, it's just going to draw more people to the area. So I too love Sturgis. It's been here as long as I've been here.
Okay, so with that, any final comments? Then it's been, yes, Councilmember Sayers, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I don't think people understand the gravity of this when Sturgis Fall Celebration brings in the Marine Band. They do that and they've promoted the Marine Band, and that doesn't just happen. Right. If they aren't given special treatment, the Sturgis Fall Celebration, someday this Marine Band won't come. And is then the Cedar Basin Jazz Festival going to bring in a Marine Band or the Navy Band or the Army Band? I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is we can protect for one weekend a year this one event that brings in all these great things, and the Marine Band's just one of them off the top of my head. So that's the final thing I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Sayers.
I would add, that's a good point, Dave, about the Marine Band, but to comment, perhaps the only caveat I would suggest is maybe for the hour and a half that the Marine Band is performing on Saturday night, there's not any activity at that site, and the rest of the time they're open. But to me, that would be the only downside, is if the rock band is out doing the Marine Band, because that is what makes Sturgis unique, is that they're here every year.
I do have a thought, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Would Sturgis Falls organization be amenable to organizing something in the plaza to join in with their group? That would be a question or a suggestion. And then all the venues would be covered. You know, they could come up with a different type of music or what have you, but then you're still sticking true to what Councilman Sayers is saying about the volunteer structure and not diluting that benefit for the city of Cedar Falls.
I think the reason why we're voting on this is because that isn't something that's feasible at this point.
Well, it's quite a ways away yet.
Well, I understand that, but I think that, and I guess that's kind of where my point is on the compromise of it. I 100% agree with everything that everybody's saying about Sturgis Falls and how unique it is to Cedar Falls, but at the same time, putting a blanket ordinance, if you will, or resolution out there in this regard, I'm not comfortable with it. I think we still have an opportunity to review it, and to Frank's point, I would hope that when the Marine band's playing, somebody isn't submitting an application to compete with that time because it is super unique to Cedar Falls. And I think that's going to be imperative of us on the council that we're taking in that into account if and when an application comes in.
So then along that lines, we could see Sturgis make an application for that time for something there that is yet to be planned.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. There's nothing stopping Sturgis from applying for that spot on, anytime really, or anyone. I just don't feel like it's the city's place to get in and say what events are going to succeed or not succeed. It's our place to set the policy for how you apply for it. And we have the contract to honor with Sturgis. And I'd like to just see us leave it the way it is and allow a free market and open and allow us to review applications as they come forward.
Okay, so it's been motioned and seconded to direct staff to draft a Sturgis Falls celebration contract with proposed amended language to be included that the city agrees not to issue any special events permits on city-owned property located in that area previously described. All in favor of this, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so I'll need to see a show of hands. So raise your hand for aye. I see 1, 2, 3. And opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that fails, which means there would still open for an additional motion. Is there a different motion someone would like to bring forward? Or for the sake of Director Shaggy, is that enough information for you?
Yeah, so at a future council meeting here in February, probably I'd like to bring forward the Sturgis Falls contract, and we'll just base it off of the previous language and not have this included.
Okay, terrific. So no other actions required. Thank you so much for that discussion. It's a difficult topic and one we could see all sides on, and look forward to seeing what comes forward. So with that, thank you, Director Schrage. We move over into the pavement alley and alley management program. We've had 50 minutes scheduled for it, but I hope we can do that in a little bit less so we can stay on our 7 o'clock time. That's with City Engineer Dave Wiki. So go ahead, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll try to get through this in a clear and concise way as possible. I know we're a little bit short on time, so let me just jump into it. So this is the pavement and alley management program presentation. This is a little bit different than what you've seen in the past, because previously, in years past, we've just had a pavement management program. For the 2022 design efforts, we are looking at combining the pavement management along with the alley management program. So just a little bit of background, the pavement management program and our street reconstructions and restorations are funded by the local option sales tax. And that local option sales tax was first implemented back in '91, and it was last voted on in 2016. A note about that is that the dollars from the lost tax, they're exclusively used for street reconstructions and street restorations. The alley, those have a little bit different funding sources. Primarily, they use the street construction fund and stormwater fund, and we can get into that just a little bit further into the presentation. So here on our map, you can see our streets that we have outlined for the 2022 plan. In green, those are the concrete reconstructions, and that cyan color, those are the asphalt reconstructed streets that we currently have planned for 2022. And these 4 streets are these are the recon streets. Just a little bit of a note, approximately of these 2 concrete reconstruction streets, the approximate cost for those is $1.5 million, and then the approximate cost for the asphalt reconstruction streets is about 1.2 million. Moving ahead, here are the restoration streets. We have Hudson Road, Saw and Seal, and then Elmwood, Franklin, Pin Oak, Nordic. Those are your typical mill and overlay streets. Getting into specifics with the 18th Street reconstruction. This is a road that's in fairly poor condition. It's last time I think it was overlaid was back in 2001, and it's a main collector street. And what we're looking at is from campus to college, that those few blocks of street that'll be phased out over the next 3 years starting in 2022. So for just 2022, our first phase is going to look at you can see from College Street to Campus Street there. This is really a continuation from the 2012 recon on 18th Street. This is a 35-foot wide street. Parking is allowed on the south side. Sharrows going in both directions are planned for the street, and there is sidewalk on the south side of the street. Part of the project will include utility replacements, meaning storm, sewer, sanitary sewer, and water. Moving ahead to the other concrete reconstruction is Olive Street from 4th to 6th. Again, this is a street that's hasn't seen a whole lot of maintenance efforts as far as any sort of rehabilitation since let's see, that was last overlaid, and I think that was last overlaid in 1993 was the last time the street was overlaid. So as you can tell, it's long overdue for a reconstruction. I know that a lot of the curbing on this street is in pretty rough shape, and the pavement surface is definitely deteriorating. So this will continue from 2021 recon efforts on Olive Street, and continuing that south from 4th Street onto 6th Street. Again, there's this is a 25-foot wide street, but parking is allowed on the west side of the street, and this is kind of like a traffic calming element of this street with the parking on the one side. There's sidewalks on both sides of the street. Drainage is a concern on the street, so there'll be significant storm sewer work done as part of this project, and other utilities as required will also be replaced. All right, moving ahead, these are the streets that we have identified for the asphalt reconstruction. And this is based on a discussion we had with the neighborhood up in the North Cedar Heights area back in 2019. We had a discussion staff had a discussion with the neighborhood on the condition of their streets and some of the issues that they were experiencing. And based on that discussion, we put together kind of like a 5-year plan to go ahead and, do some work up in this area with these streets. So one of the questions for this is, we decided the best course of action for these streets was to reconstruct them with asphalt versus concrete. And that's primarily because the corridors are very narrow. They average anywhere from 13 feet up to 19 feet. There's no curb on any of these streets. There's not a whole lot of storm water or storm sewer structures. There's sanitary sewer issues with some infiltration, and a lot of the roadways need to be redefined within the right-of-way. They kind of meander a little bit, some areas in and out of the right-of-way, so we want to kind of establish the street back in the right-of-way. So starting with a 5-year kind of outlook for this area, the map kind of outlines years 1 through 5. starting in 2022. So the primary objectives with our design for the roads up in this area is, you know, to improve some of the drainage issues by putting on at least one side of the pavement curb and gutter to kind of direct the flow of stormwater. Where we are able to, or we're going to try to get the street restable or reestablish that street, an 18-foot wide street within the right of way. But some of the other challenges, you know, there's narrow shoulders in areas, sometimes no shoulders. There's grade differences, and so there's several challenges that we have to overcome. But the improvements will be, you know, hopefully establish clear two ways of movement with vehicles, and improve snow removal and trash collection on these streets. So that is the kind of the big picture of our 5-year plan. So starting in 2022, the 2 streets we have identified. Here's the first is Timber Drive, and that will be from Grand Boulevard to Greenwood Avenue. The average is about 15 foot wide. Utilities would need to be replaced, storm, sanitary, and water. The idea for this is to start at the culvert on the low side of the street and then work your way up to the northern part of the street. And as you can see, you know, there's been potholing, there's been rutting, pavement deteriorations, patching from various different types of either sanitary or water main repair work. So just in really rough condition. These streets haven't seen a whole lot of maintenance. With some, I think the main maintenance has probably been some patching and some seal coating. Again,
is it okay to ask a question?
Certainly.
I'm just curious, Dave, if you've had a chance, or will you take some time now to share this plan with those folks in that neighborhood?
Yes, we certainly can. You know, based on how the motion goes tonight, we'll proceed from that point on. But we will certainly share. Yeah, we'll certainly share with the neighborhood.
Super. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt.
Dave, I have a question if I'm not muted here.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. In that previous photo, I noticed there was a telephone pole there. Have we underground much of this area? Is it on CFCU plan to underground here if they haven't, that sort of thing? Because if we're going to do a major overhaul of storm and sanitary and curbing and all that, would it be prudent to look at undergrounding whatever might be in the air, cable, that sort of thing, to really make it a top-notch neighborhood in that regard, aesthetics?
Sure. So, you know, we'll have those discussions with CFU. We haven't had any really hard line discussions with them yet at this point, but we always try to take that into consideration, you know, when we're doing these streets.
And what I missed, what's the time frame for this section right next summer or down the road?
This will be fiscal year 2022.
Fiscal year, so starting, okay. But the work will be done in calendar year 22 or starting 21? Is it construction year 22?
Correct. And we're in design currently, so, you know, this is just for our design efforts for these streets being planned. All right, moving forward, this just shows you the limits of that Timber Drive from Grand to Greenwood. All right, moving forward, our next street in this area is going to be Ridgewood Drive. It's from Greenwood Avenue to Cherry Boulevard. Some of the things on this street, you know, it averages about 14 feet if we can get it back out to 18 feet, that'd be great. But you can see the condition of the roadway. You know, there's alligator cracking, potholes rutting, so on and so forth. Again, utilities will be replaced as part of the ongoing work for this street. Storm sanitary and water. And again, we'll be starting on the downhill side where the culvert is, and work our way back uphill. That way we can always establish positive drainage throughout the project. There is no curb and gutter. Obviously, some of those timbers you see that sort of quasi almost look like a curb are just sort of little timber retaining walls from private citizens. One of the things to note on this street is, well, there's the limits of the street. You can see from Cherry Lane all the way down to Greenwood. Getting into that Greenwood Avenue intersection a little bit, because that's where that main culvert is in the drainage area, drainage path. In 2021, we have a slope stabilization project right there on the north side of Ridgewood Drive. Had some ongoing issues in that area, and that's a project that's going to be addressed next year. Again, as you can tell, the street's not in real good shape. Last time it had any maintenance was a previous seal coat project, and that was a number of years ago. So those are the streets that are being reconstructed or planned to be reconstructed. And so before I move on to the restoration streets, I'm just going to hit on the bicycle networks and the recommended improvements. Recommended for these streets that we've discussed so far is to add the Sherrills in both directions in 18th Street. City staff has been working with the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee, and we've presented to them a couple times, and specifically, you know, to work with them and try to help establish a bike network. And specifically, we went over the streets that are planned out for not only 21 but 2022 as well. And you know, basically explain to them, you know, what the justifications were, what the challenges were on adding, you know, either bike lanes or dedicated lanes, and what some of the drawbacks would be. And the biggest one, especially along 18th, would have been, you know, in order to add a dedicated lane, you'd have to give up the parking. And to give up the parking just is not very feasible. Moving on. So that's what I have for the street reconstructions. I'm going to turn it over to Matt Firehelm, and he's going to get into the restorations. And with that, I'll just turn it over to Matt. So Matt,
thanks, David.
Take it away.
You're sweet.
Sure. The slide shown outlines the 2022 restoration streets. Many of these streets and projects include predominantly asphalt overlays, along with some intake replacements, curb replacements, and subdrain in spots where it's necessary. Again, your list was shown on the third slide, and it had a fairly good geographic distribution throughout the city. The streets included are Elmwood Avenue from Rainbow Drive to Waterloo Road, Franklin Street from West 20th to West 22nd, Hudson Road from 1st Street to 12th, Nordic Drive from Westminster Drive to the dead end, and Pin Oak Drive from Waterloo to Victory. Of note here, the Hudson Road project is a saw and seal, which does include an asphalt overlay, and then it's immediately followed by saw cutting and sealing the joints to take care of some restoration up front, which saves some costs down the line. You know, it's found to significantly reduce some maintenance costs just with those, you know, the reflective cracking involved. And if we can get in there and do it ahead of time, it saves time and money down the road. Next slide, please. For these next 4 slides, I would just point out that for 2023 through 26, we'll be bringing these lists back in the future on an annual basis, just like we're doing tonight, before we move into final design. So again, these are just our best plan at this point in time. So on 2023, you can see the reconstruction streets, our McLean Drive, Walnut Street, next section of West 18th, East Ridgewood Drive, Woodland Drive, and Madison Street. And the restorations are Green Hill Road and Veralta Drive. Madison Street is the first of 2 phases that we have shown. And then this does get into the second phase of the North Cedar Heights area with Ridgewood and Woodland. Next slide, please. This slide shows 2024's plan, which includes a section of College Street, Lakeshore Drive, again, the next section and the third phase of West 18th, Greenwood Avenue, Edwards Avenue, and Madison Street. Our restoration streets scheduled are Viking Road, Lincoln Street, and Ridgeway Avenue. The first of 3 phases is included in this year for College Street. This also includes phase 3 of the North Cedar Heights area. Next slide, please. For 2025, we've got the second section of College Street, Carlton Drive, River Ridge Road, Cherry Lane, which is in the 4th phase for the North Cedar Heights area, Greenwood Avenue, also in that phase. Our restoration streets, Lone Tree Road and Lincoln Street. Next slide, please. And this is 2026, the last year in our 5-year plan. It includes Oakland Avenue, Picturesque Drive, West 23rd Street, West Ridgewood Drive, and again, the 5th and final phase of the North Cedar Heights area. The 3rd phase for College Street, restoration would include Lincoln Street, Winter Ridge Road, and Winter Ridge Lane. So again, we've tried to break these up and get as much geographic distribution as we can throughout the city. So again, I turn it back to you, David, for the continuation of the presentation.
All right, so the second half of our presentation is going to jump into the alley management program. But before we dive into that, I kind of wanted to pause here real quickly and see if we had any questions before I continued on with the alley management.
Like we have none, Mr. Wiki, so feel free to continue on.
Okay, great. So I'm going to give a brief introduction for the alley management program here, and then I'll turn it over to staff engineer Ben Claypool. So in Cedar Falls, we have a total of 166 alleys, of which 131 are gravel. We have 8 asphalt, 16 permeable alleys, and 11 concrete alleys. Concrete alleys mostly just occur in the business areas of downtown, just for commercial use. So that's for note. But anyway, that's kind of just a high level introduction, and I will switch it over or turn it over to Ben, and he'll get into the meat of the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, David. Kind of jumping off of that, the point of both this presentation and formerly what used to stand on its own as the pavement management presentation are combined because the engineering division is taking the step forward to make the alley management program more of a formalized program and have a better plan moving forward. And the problem that we're foreseeing and are starting to run into more and more is with the condition of those very long, almost or mostly original concrete or gravel alleys in the city deteriorating at a rate that is no longer really maintainable. So to give a little history on where we've been, in 2015, the city had an alley-wide assessment of the alleys with the goal to determine the alley conditions and prioritize reconstruction efforts at that time. Different facets were considered, but ultimately it gave the map, but not a lot of direction at that point in time. Just before that year was started in 2014, the city constructed their first permeable alley just next to the UNI bookstore. That was the first one we constructed. And that kind of issued in a few more, with the success of its drainability, the city issued in a few more permeable alleys in the next few years. In 2018, a new map was created, and it was the permeable alley improvement locations, kind of a diagram that was laid out with the plan to reconstruct more permeable alleys as funding allowed throughout the city. And that took the next step forward. We were starting to address more of our severe alleys and bring them up to date. A huge push in that was some grant funding that I'll get into just in a slide or two. But that was really the beginning. And for 2021, they're starting this next construction season and moving forward. Really, the goal is to set more of a baseline at 2 to 3 permeable alleys a year, with 1 to 2 commercial or priority alleys a year. I'll get into those details in the next slides as well. So with the new network, the goal was really to ask a few questions right up front and improve the selection criteria for whether or not an alley should be constructed. What criteria are we looking at? Step one, should it be reconstructed? And a few things we look at were, are there any known concerns? Are there engineering problems we see? Is there ponding? Is there difficulty with access to a residence or a business? In general, is this alley not able to serve its users in a way that it's supposed to? We also looked and talked with trash and refuse. We have a number of alleys that have trash pickup. The age of the alley currently, almost all of them are just original to date. So we have a very aged network of alleys right now. And another huge one was, how often does operations and maintenance have to get out and perform maintenance on those? That'd be to correct some drainage problems on these gravel washouts, rutting. Is the alley no longer impassable because of snow and ice buildup? The gravel's washing out onto the street. It's causing some problems on the adjacent pavement. And we'll see our public works street crews having to go out and assess those more and more frequently, putting more of our focus on those alleys. You could jump to the next slide, David. Then the second step, after just determining whether or not we should reconstruct an alley, is, should the alley be permeable? And there's a few criteria here that we were looking at. One of them was the alley located in a critical watershed. I'll explain on that more on the next slide. But the next three are more just engineering practicality related. So is there enough slope for drainage? Is the alley tilted to allow water to flow, to get collected through the brick and then flow out of it? Is there immediate access to city storm sewer? So if we're collecting the water in the rock chamber beneath the alley and piping it, do we have a storm pipe we can tie into and then allow us to safely and appropriately drain the alley? And then how much of the alley itself is drained toward the storm sewer? So do we have it all pointed downhill to a city storm network, or is it broken in the middle, half pitching to the north, half pitching to the south, and reconstructing is permeable, we could only drain half of it? Things we look at there, just more of those criteria. If you could jump to the next slide, David. So this was the sub watersheds that I had referred to. It's hard to see the text, but Jennings and College Square are the two sub watersheds that were deemed critical with the Iowa DNR. And around 2014, and when the city started reconstructing some of these alleys, there were a number of opportunities to apply for grants for the alleys that were within these sub watersheds to get some grant funding through the DNR and IDALS, the Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. And when those grants were received, we can get up to 75% funding on an alley, completely covered, just to help improve the water quality of that impaired watershed. More recently, those awards have been going to wetland related projects in neighboring communities and towns. They've been harder to get for alleys. We do have one alley for the grant funding would be coming through in 2022 for 75% of the project costs, just east of Main Street. Next slide, David. So kind of a general overview before I get into maps. In 2021, we have 2 planned permeable alleys with 1 concrete alley for more of a maintenance need to have that remedied. And then the 5-year plan from 2022 and through 2026. And just to reiterate on Matt Firehelm's point, we'd be bringing each subsequent year to council, much like pavement management. There's 14 planned permeable alleys and 11 concrete alleys, 5 of those serving the commercial or more business oriented areas, and six of those being more the public works street crews priorities. Next slide, David. So in 2021, the concrete alley is a half alley that will be, the southern half is still gravel, causing some maintenance issues. And for the observed traffic volumes in that area, that'd be completing the segment and no longer having that cause any more problems. And then the 2 permeable alleys are connecting 12th and 13th Street between Washington and Main Street, and then Searly Boulevard to West 26th Street between Walnut and Iowa. The Searly to 26th alley is a 2-block alley with a significant ponding issue in the middle that will allow us to correct one of the more problematic alleys that we are seeing. Next slide. In 2022, we have the 3 concrete alleys and the 2 permeable. The first concrete alley is connecting Ellen and Francis Street between West 1st and West 2nd Street. This is the alley behind the music station. It's more piecemealed and patched right now than it really is an alley. Public Works street crews are out there often trying to continue its service and help maintain that business and residential access on the south side as well. We then have the 9th to 10th and 13th to 14th alleys in green that are public work priority alleys that will help assess some of the significant rutting and washout that we see. And then we have the 11th to 12th Street and 22nd to West Searly alley slated for the permeable reconstruction. And we were able to, at least in the plan, have that 3rd concrete alley in this year due to the grant funding seen on the more northern permeable alley. Next slide, David. And then I'll be a little more brief on the next few years, but we have the 2 more concrete alleys slated in this year. The more northern one between 2nd and 3rd would be a continuation in that business district. And then the more southern one between 13th and 14th would be another public works priority one. And we have 3 somewhat similar area permeable alleys that would be slated for that reconstruction. Next slide, David. 2024, more of the same story, completing an additional business alley up in the downtown area, as well as a public works priority alley just off Waterloo Road by CFU plant, and then 3 additional permeable alleys. And then 2025. This one, again, another commercial one with an additional public works concrete alley planned. The more southern alley is a small segment of gravel that often requires public works maintenance, connecting a critical connection between some businesses and residences down by the college. And then the 3 permeable alleys would be geographically very close to each other, allowing for a convenient construction in that calendar year. And then the last year, David, again, 2 more concrete alleys with a follow-up 3 permeable alleys. With this plan in place, that would put just a little over 40 alleys fully reconstructed, starting from around 2014 through this 2026. Successfully implementing this plan moving into the forward allows the city to address a good number of the alleys and focus on the alleys that are causing that maintenance issues and just that usability issues for businesses and residences across the city. It really is a nice step forward to start addressing more and more of those alleys as time moves on. And with that, I'll hand it off to David.
Thank you, Mr. Claypool.
All right, thanks, Ben. So staff is recommending to council for a motion to approve the 2022 pavement and alley management plans so we can proceed with the final design. And with that kind of wraps up our presentation, and I'll entertain any questions.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Claypool, we can certainly empathize with trying to make work from home, so you handled it great. Appreciate it. So with that, before going into council discussion, I will ask for a motion on this.
Make that
Move approval.
Okay, it's motion for approval and seconded. Council discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, Councilmember Cyrus, please.
Mr. Wiki, I have a question on it's kind of on a specific alley. I don't know if you'll know the answer, but it's between 4th and 5th Street and between Main and Washington, and it's quite new. And it looks like the intake there was a little bit too tall. I think you guys maybe put it in last year. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, sir.
Is that on the schedule for this year or next year to be changed? They had a problem with it running in the back door of the business.
So that alley, we have been evaluating that alley and looking at it. And right now we are designing and getting ready for the downtown phase 2 project. And so portion of this alley will get incorporated with that downtown phase 2 project.
On the north end of that alley?
Correct.
So will it be this year or next year, do you think? I mean, the next construction season?
Yes.
Okay.
When the downtown project commences.
Next year then?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, I have a question for you.
Yes, Councilor Cruz, go ahead.
On the alley choices, there's an alleyway, and I won't be able to name off the streets. I want to say Olive and Walnut. To the north of Searly Park, there's a short half a block length alley, pretty steep. And the residents explained to me that staff has been out there to look at it and size it up. And I know staff has mentioned that there wasn't a storm sewer nearby to put in permeable. But looking at our new design process here, it looks like the concrete alley would be the way to go because of the lack of the storm sewer. I've personally witnessed gravel on a 2-inch rain washing down University Avenue, and I traced it back up to these particular alleyways. Is there a way, and it looks like it's right on the edge of the Jennings watershed, when you mention, the silting and that, can we assess the viability of getting that moved up, or attention to? Because the residents said that staff was going to do something right away or sooner than later, and I don't see it on this list for 5 years. So
We have been out to that alley and we've looked at it, and we are evaluating what the best path forward is for that alley. I mean, as you're aware, it's a difficult area just by the nature of the particular condition and the problems that residents may experience out there. I know that there's a belly essentially right in the middle of that alley, and with no good storm sewer outlet, it makes it a little bit challenging. But we have looked at that alley and we'll continue to evaluate it, and if we'll come up with a good plan for it.
right, I know I've driven by and I see several end loaders worth of gravel, it seems, in the street that has to be pushed back up in the alleyway repetitively. So
Right.
come up with a solution. Thanks, Dave.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions or comments from council? Then it has been motioned and seconded to approve the 2022 pavement and alley management plans and to have staff proceed with final design. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none opposed, that passes. And then that concludes our agenda for our committee of the whole. So I have our time at 7:05. Channel 15, I need about 5 minutes to reset. So I'll look to reconvene us again at 7:10. We'll see you then.